serial killer in the room. You probably opened the door and politely allowed them to walk in ahead of you. You allow them to sit next to you, and they've actually probably become one of your best friends without you knowing it. This serial killer loves to play the long game. They're insidious in their actions, and they know exactly what they're doing. The serial killer's name is stress. My name is Bronwen, and I am a recovering perfectionist. While most people laugh when they hear me say that, it's absolutely true. Not that long ago, my life was very complex. And to give you an idea of just how complex my life was, I thought I would let you have a bit of a glimpse into what a day used to look like. My alarm used to go off in the morning. I would open my eyes unwillingly, and my first thought for the day would be, it cannot be time to get up. That thought would be followed by, it'll be okay as long as I get to the shower. If I get to the shower will wake me up and I can get into my day. And then that wouldn't work, and I would drag my tired, exhausted, and really, really painful body into the day with me. I would gulp very quickly down some food, and then I would rush out the door so that I could be at the office before everybody else. I would get into the day. I would spend my entire day looking after everybody else, fixing everybody else's problems, and making sure that everybody else was okay. Then I would leave the office and I would go to the gym, where I would punish my body until I was so exhausted that I could hardly drive home. I'd get home, I would prepare a meal, sit down and absolutely inhale that meal because there's only a small amount of time to eat. Then I would sit down, I would open my laptop, and I would start my work for the day. When I finally dragged myself to bed, I would fall into bed, and then my mind would kick in. And I would worry about all the things that had happened during the day. How had I handled them? Did I say the right thing? Was that person still upset with me? Is that person okay? How is that person tonight? What are they thinking? How are they feeling? And I took on responsibility for all of it. Once I'd got through that, then I would transition into worrying about what might happen the next day. What conversation might come up in that meeting? How am I going to handle it? What if they say this? What's my response going to be? How am I going to make sure that everybody is okay? I would finally fall into a very disrupted sleep. And if I was lucky, I would get 2 hours of very inconsistent, very disrupted sleep, and then the alarm would go off again and the cycle would start all over again. On top of that, I was trying to be 3 different people in different situations in my life. Those 3 different people had 3 different surnames. So there was Bronwen at work, Bronwen at home, and then there was Bronwena. And Bronwena came out after a few drinks. Bronwena at work was staid and solid and mature and responsible. Bronwen at home was loving and giving and caring and nurturing. And Bronwena, well, she just entertained. She made sure that everybody had a good time. Bronwen at work and Bronwen at home had different signatures. And it got to the point where my team at work would put a piece of paper under my nose for me to sign, and they would have to remind me who I was in that moment and which signature to use. And all of that came to a massive head when I was given a diagnosis of, you don't actually have psoriasis as we've thought for the last 8 years. You actually have skin cancer and you're going to need plastic surgery. And in that moment, when my life took a massive turn, I didn't stop. I didn't look at that and say, it's time for me to reevaluate. I stepped straight into, I'm really annoyed. How am I going to schedule time in my diary for surgery? So I gave myself half a day to have 6 centimeters of my head cut out. And then I was back on my laptop that same afternoon, and I was working, and I was looking after everybody else, and I was making sure that they were okay. And then 3 days later, I went back to the surgeon for my post-operative check, and they took the staples and the stitches and the bandages off the wound on my head. And for some reason, the surgeon and his nurse left the room. And my husband, John, was with me because I couldn't drive. I had a head injury. And I looked across the room at John and I said, is it okay? And John looked at me and just said, oh, yeah. And I knew in that moment that something wasn't right. So I got up and I walked across the room and I looked in the mirror, and the reflection that was looking back at me was like a quarter of my head was missing. And I was so unprepared for the vision of what I was seeing that the shock I received in that moment completely dropped me. And in that moment, I went from being a fully functioning, award-winning executive to on the floor, unable to cope in everyday life and unable to stop crying. And a lot of people have asked me what that moment was like. And the only way that I can allow people to have a bit of an insight into that is to ask you to imagine that in 5 seconds' time, someone clicks their fingers and everything you know, all of your intelligence, your ability to cognitively process things, your ability to look at things around you and understand what is going on disappears. It's like you're sitting in a void and life moves around you and you can see that happening, but you can't understand it. People start asking you questions and you can't understand what they're asking. You can't understand what they're saying. Every single thing that you had planned for your future, every thought, every hope, every dream, every step you thought you had taken into your pathway moving forwards is gone. Now overlay on top of that, you can't explain any of that to anyone because you don't understand it. That moment changed my life forever. It took me 2 years of the most invasive, intensive, and overwhelming work with clinical psychologists, grief counsellors, and energy medicine professionals to get myself back to a point where I could exist in everyday basic life. And it was another 12 months of that same work before I knew who I was, where I wanted to go, and how I wanted to be living my life. That 3-year journey for me opened up the most incredible world of information, knowledge, and wisdom. And I now use that knowledge and wisdom to teach people there's a very different way to live. So today, I really want to talk to you about stress, understanding it and understanding the role that it plays in your life, and also understanding just how easily you can do things a little bit differently to significantly change your life so that you don't have to have that same break moment and that break point that I went through. Life is really simple. I spend every day trying to find the simplest path through life now, because we make life so complex when simplicity will do. We go out of our way to put ourselves in situations where there is complexity and noise, and actually the easiest and most graceful path through life is down a simple track. So when I talk about stress, and I often ask people to give me what their definition of stress is, it's almost always given back to me as work-related. And traditionally, most stress in life has come from work. But life has changed. Life is so different now. And we actually have stress coming from so many different avenues in our life. We need to understand it. We need to actually be able to identify as a unique individual what the stress is in our life. So stress comes from work situations. It also comes from that overlap in life now. So previously, we used to be able to go to work, walk out the door, and step into our office, and then we were at work. Then we would leave work, we'd come home, we'd step in the door at home, and we would be at home. And the two pretty much left each other alone. But now we have this amazing technology that allows us to be connected 24/7. And that means that that technology allows those lives to overlap. So when we're at work, we have the noise interrupting us from at home. When we're at home, we have the noise interrupting us from work. That creates additional stress. Stress also comes from really intensive and prolonged exercise. So if you are always, like I used to, go home from work and go to the gym and really punish my body constantly with really high impact or really high endurance activities, then your body is under stress. There's also a lot more additives and preservatives in our food than there ever was before, and that puts your body under stress. There's a lot more toxins in the cleaning products that we have in our homes, and that puts your body under stress. We have toxic relationships, we have toxic people, we have toxic places. All of that puts your body under stress. We also have this amazing thing called technology, puts your body under stress. Anything that has Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, is actually emitting different frequencies constantly, and those frequencies are interrupting with the natural flow of your body. It's putting your body under stress. There is also now what's called digital dementia, and that's caused by using too much technology too often. And the second that you put your mobile phone or a tablet into your hand and your body goes into this position, you automatically trigger what's called fight and flight sensation in your body. So your body is under stress. And the statistics now are showing that 80% of us spend more than 70% of every day in fight or flight. And what does that mean? Well, we are genetically programmed to have a fight or flight mode. So fight or flight was pretty much given to us so that when we were down at the river and we were getting a drink and there's a tiger comes along that decides it would like to make you its dinner, you are given the ability within your body to determine very quickly whether or not you would like to fight that or flee from it. Fight or flight. But to do that, your body has to undergo a particular process. And within your body, when you go into fight or flight, basically what happens is every single process and organ in your body shuts down and everything rushes to the extremities. So all the blood, all the energy, all the fuel within your body rushes to your extremities, so your arms and your legs, so that you can run away and or either fight very quickly and with an immense power. But I don't know about you, but I don't have too many situations in my life right now where I meet a tiger at the river. Unfortunately, My body doesn't know the difference between the tiger at the river and the stress that comes from just ducking my head and putting my head in the wrong position when I'm looking at my mobile phone. So my body goes into fight and flight mode anyway, even though technically I am safe. But if I'm in fight or flight mode for more than 70% of every day, I have no digestive process. My organs aren't working, so my kidneys, my liver, my pancreas, my spleen, my gallbladder, all of them shut down and don't do their job. That means that any toxins that I have in my system are stuck there. So my body then has to create fat cells to store the toxins until such time as my body can come back to what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, so that it can actually relax and be able to do what it needs to do. And it takes an hour after you come back into the parasympathetic nervous system for your body to kick the digestive process back off. When you're in fight or flight mode, your system will not allow you to sleep because your body does not want you to go into a deep REM sleep if you are in a dangerous situation. So even though technically you're safe, your body's in fight or flight mode, so you are not sleeping. Now, I existed for over 12 years on roughly 2 hours a night sleep. The stats show that after 3 to 5 days, you lose 30% cognitive functioning when you don't sleep well. So 12 years of less than 2 hours a night sleep, I'm surprised that I was still walking. It's really easy to see how our lives get so out of control when you see so many different styles of stress that are coming into our life. The biggest thing that you need to do is understand where your stress is coming from. Because once you understand where your stress is coming from, it makes it easier to have a look at how you can deal with it. Most of the time, we just spend on autopilot. Life is so fast now, and life's not going to get any slower. So we have to look after ourselves within the speed of life. We have to start doing things differently. If we keep going the way that we're going, then like me, without my breakdown, I would have been dead at 45. And that's a sobering thought, because I thought I was living my life in service to others. What I didn't realize was that by not looking after myself within that, I had so little to give to others. So stress, we have a look at where it's coming from, and you have a look, everybody's a unique individual. So everybody is going to have a different makeup of where their stress is coming from and how it's affecting them. The biggest issue that then comes up at this point is the issue of overwhelm. So most people go straight to overwhelm of, oh my goodness, I've got these 4 areas in my life that I've got stress coming in. I've got to throw my whole life out and start again. And actually that's not true. Because when you consider that you put a compass in front of you, and if you had that compass on your hand and you just walked directly north on the compass, and then you decided, I'm just going to change it to 1 degree, so I'm walking 1 degree off north, and you walk on that line instead, you'll end up in a significantly different place than where you came from. So we need to actually cut the noise and the complexity and the conditioning that we've been given around change being hard, and just really understand that tiny little things that we do differently can significantly change the direction of our life. So what are some of the things that you can do to actually really help you to cut the stress and cut it quickly? There's a couple of things. One of those is totally underrated, but the most highly effective thing that you can do. And that is learn to breathe. And it is so simple that most people think that it's a waste of time. But abdominal breathing is the only scientifically proven thing that you can do that will immediately send you from fight and flight into the parasympathetic nervous system. And all you have to do is stand up, take deep breaths right down into your abdomen, and that means letting your abdomen come out when you breathe in and go back in when you breathe out. And you only have to do 5 or 6 breaths. Make the out breath slightly longer than the in breath, and you will immediately move into the parasympathetic nervous system. So then, if it's really that easy, how do you remember to do it? Because you've had decades of training that's taught you to breathe from here. Why don't you use this wonderful thing called technology? We all have these electronic diaries that have these reminders that pop up. Put a reminder in every hour that just says breathe. And you can get up, go and get a glass of water, and while the water's filling, you can do your breathing. It really is that simple. Life doesn't have to be complex. Life doesn't have to be noisy. And life doesn't have to be hard for you to make significant steps in a different way. One of the biggest things that I learned through my recovery was that you don't have to wait for the traumatic event before you're allowed to change. A couple of things that I've heard a lot as I've gone out and into the world and done a lot of talking and a lot of speaking. It's okay for you because. So people will say to me, it's okay for you to live differently because you've had cancer. It's okay for you to live differently because you've had a breakdown. You need to do things differently. And whilst it's true that when I was at the absolute bottom of the pit of my breakdown, I was faced with a very basic question. And in its absolute simplicity in life, this is the basic question that you are asked. Do you want to live or do you want to die? That's the basic question of life. And if you choose to live, your next choice is, how do you want to do that? You are a unique individual. Your life is made up of choices. You can choose to live differently. You can choose to break the rules. I love breaking rules. Do it constantly. And by rules, I'm not talking about go and DUI and run down the street and drive over people. And I mean, there's rules in place that are there for, the good of everyone. I'm talking about the rules when somebody says you have to do this, you must do that. That's not acceptable about you. This part of you is okay, but that part's not. The rules that say life wasn't meant to be easy. You must save for a rainy day. Those rules, what I've learned to do is start to ask the question, what if they're wrong? What if that rule actually doesn't serve me for my life? And I have an overarching rule that I put in place for myself that says do no harm. So as long as what the decisions that I'm making in my life are right for me and aligned with my values and who I am, and they do no harm to anybody else, then I can absolutely strongly stand within my decisions knowing that they're right for me. And people around me might not like that I've made the decisions that I've made. And that's okay, because they're their own individual and they're making decisions for their life. But I don't let that affect the decisions that I make for my life. Because this process has given me the gift of knowing who I am. And I know now that what was missing from my life before was that I had no connection to who I truly was. I was completely unempowered in my life, and I had no simplicity in what I was doing and how I was doing it. So now everything I do is about empowering simple connection. Because if you get those 3 things right in your life, you will never look back and you will live your life completely differently. And I guess one of the other things that I really came across when I was recovering and when I was rebuilding my life and when I was looking at the million pieces of myself that were shattered on the floor, and I had to pick each one up individually and look at them and decide whether or not that was going back into the new person that I was becoming, was really understanding what happens within our bodies when we change. And what I came to realize is that we fear change more than we fear death. And we fear change because we've been taught that it's really hard. And we've been taught that it's not worth it. But one of the things I came across was some work that's being done by a guy called Todd Herman in the US. And he works with high-performance athletes. And what he does, in his own words, is he says he helps them get out of their own way. And he talks about what happens on a physiological level within ourselves when we change. And his explanation goes something like this. There's a hormone cocktail that comes into our bodies that however we're living, that hormone cocktail is set. And our cells replicate within our bodies based on receiving that particular hormone cocktail. Say we go from being in a really stressed state of being, and suddenly we decide we want to go and be completely zen. Those are poles apart. And so the hormone cocktail that would be released into the body are completely different. So the body's used to receiving this really highly stressed hormone cocktail, and it comes into the body and the cells go, great, here comes the hormone cocktail. This is amazing. I'll have some of that. And then they replicate. But then all of a sudden I've decided I want to be really zen. So in comes this hormone cocktail. And the cells are going, great, here comes the hormone cocktail. No, what's this? I can't recognize this. This doesn't work. What's going on? And so then the cells try to vibrate so that they can shake the hormone cocktail into place so it fits. The body doesn't recognize it, and the body feels very uncomfortable because of it. And one of the examples he gave for this was, haven't been to the gym for 5 years, and suddenly one morning I wake up and I decide it's time to get fit. So I set the alarm for 5 a.m. the next morning, and the alarm goes off, and I jump out of bed and I put all my gym gear on and I go to the gym and I get the most amazing workout, and I come out of there and I'm full of endorphins and everything's just amazing, and isn't this the best decision I've ever made? Go home, go to bed, get up the next morning, the alarm goes off at 5 o'clock to go to the gym, and you get up and you go, oh yeah, that was okay yesterday. That's cool. I'll put my gym gear back on and I'll go back to the gym. Workout today is a little bit harder, but that's okay. Yesterday was really good. Go home, set the alarm goes off the next morning. Oh, wow, my body hurts. I'm really tired. I don't know that this was a good idea. Maybe I'm way too old for this now. What's going on? This was the worst decision ever. I don't think I can get out of bed. And what he says is what's happening in the body is that at that moment, that's when the hormone has started to vibrate to try and reach into the new cells so that your cells can replicate. And it's absolutely normal. But we've been taught through our conditioning that it's not, that it's hard, that we have to give up, that we actually can't do this. It's too hard. It's not worth it. And that's when our thinking takes over, and that's why we drop off so often with the things that we want to make changes with. And what Todd Herman says is that's the point when you should say, actually, no, I understand what's happening in my body now. This is absolutely normal, and I know that I'm on the right path now. And that got me thinking, well, if that's what's happening within me when I decide to make a change, what happens to the people around me? Because if I've decided to make a change, often that impacts the people around me as well, So surely that same hormone change must be happening within them, and they haven't made the decision to change. They don't understand what's going on. They don't understand how this change works within them. They haven't made the decision to change. They feel terrible, and all they know is that it's because of you. So please just stop that. Stop doing it. And that's why the people closest to us are the ones that are most likely to sabotage the changes that we try and make in our life, because they know that they're feeling uncomfortable. It's not working. What's happening? All I know is that you're the one that's causing it. So stop it. All we have to do is understand what's going on. When we understand what's going on, we can say, it's okay. This is exactly how it's supposed to be. I just need to keep going a little bit more, one little step at a time, and then I'm going to get to where I want to be really quickly. And now it makes sense when we understand that, why the greatest change comes when you're just about to give up. Because you've given up too soon. You haven't understood that you're going through exactly what you're supposed to go through. And I think the other really big realization that I had through my recovery process was that we are more prepared to sit in our comfort zones, in comfortable misery, because there's nothing comfortable about what's in our comfort zones. We are more prepared to live in a life that is stressed and exhausted because it's a known. All of that comes with, being, tired and aching and you can't look out of your eyes because they're burning because you are just pushed so hard. We are prepared to go through the pain and live a life of misery over here, but we're not prepared to have a little bit of discomfort over here to do something a little bit differently. Yet over here is where we can significantly change how we're living our life. Choices. So I often get asked, what's the one overarching thing that I learnt from going through what I went through? And it's a hard question to answer because there was so much that I was gifted with through that process. But if I have to bring it back to just one thing, then it would be this. I have a very, very cool life now. I get to stand on some of the biggest stages in the world and talk to people in a way that helps them to wake up and see that their life can be so much different. My life is full of fun and love and laughter. I get to sit and write. It's very cool. But there's nothing that I have in my life now that wasn't easily, readily, and affordably available to me before. It's just that I was so caught up in being stressed and exhausted and playing the game that I couldn't see how easily I could have something else. So there's 3 questions that I'd like to leave you with today. The first is, are you happy with how you're living your life? The second question is, if your answer to the first question was no, are you prepared to sit and stay and live exactly as you are living now anyway? And the third question is, are you prepared to do a few things a little bit differently to significantly change your life and redefine a new kind of cool?